Why men are so lonely. Welcome to Change the Conversation with the Hopefulist. My name is Wendy McClure, and it's time we had a conversation about living in a patriarchy and how that affects our lives. Together, we can make a difference and change the conversation. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you taking the time to open up your mind a little bit and consider things that maybe you've never considered before, because we are at a point in the history of this country of when women were finally standing on their own, being successful, being able to direct their own lives. And now we're at a point where we're having laws passed about what we can and cannot do when it comes to our body, when it comes to the direction of our life. And it's an attempt to push us backwards. So it's really, really important to have these types of conversations to explore how far we have come in spite of all of the things that have held us back. And now that we're finally successful on our own, they're trying to push us backwards by the laws and the legislation that they're putting forth. And a lot of women are going along with this because, and this is something I will get into at a later date, it is just easier to comply. It is safer to comply. And I get that. But we need to stand up for women, for the generations to come after us, as well as for ourselves. And it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be fun, but it is going to be the right thing to do, and it will be worth it in the end. Now, as Gen Xers, we really were the first generation where it was kind of a given that we were going to go to college. You know, my mother's generation was the silent generation, and predominantly women did not go to college in that generation. The baby boomers, women started to go to college, but I think that was more of a conversation. It depended on what, you plan to do with your life. It depended on the type of family that you grew up in and whether you were going to be a more traditional wife or if you were going to go out on your own and pursue your own career. And by the time Generation X came around, it was pretty much a given that women were going to go to college alongside of men. That's just the way society had deemed it at that point. So we are the first generation to go to college as a whole and pursue a career before marriage. And that is when it started to be pushed off a little bit further in age when it comes to marriage and to starting a family. Because, people with money always went to college. Women would go to college way back in the day, basically to find a husband. And that may still be the case with, newer generations that came along. But they also had the opportunity to go if they didn't want to follow the traditional route. They had the means to go to college and pursue something outside of marriage and family if that's what they chose. But now Generation X finally had these same opportunities. College still had not gotten completely out of control with tuition costs and room and board. Books, I have to say, were already astronomical. I mean, it was crazy how much books were when I went to school. But relatively speaking, it did not cost that much for me to go to college. For a little bit of comparison's sake, I don't know what tuition is like now. I don't have anybody in college. I've heard some amounts. Obviously, it depends on where you go to school. I went to Temple University, which is a very well-known school, but it is also a state school. So it is not as expensive as a lot of private colleges, especially like Ivy League colleges like Yale and Harvard and all of those. But when I went to Temple, I went in the late 80s, early 90s. And I know specifically how much it cost because I had a stipend, shall we say, of $5,000 a year that covered my college costs. And this was an arrangement that was made between my mother and my father, and that's how much I got each year. And I commuted to Temple. I did not live there. I didn't have any expenses other than tuition and books. And books I paid for on my own. And it was just below $5,000 per year, not semester, per year, for me to attend Temple University. Again, this is in the early 90s. I know it's upwards of $20,000 a year now, at least. I mean, like I said, I don't really know the figures, but this was when it was still, you were able to go to college without worrying that you were going to be in debt for the next 20 years of your life. So not only was it more acceptable and normal for women to go to college then, but it was also accessible. I mean, I know a lot of people who took out school loans, but again, they weren't like they are now. People are graduating now with 6 figures in debt. And that's not abnormal. But it wasn't like that in the early 90s when I went to college. So, that in itself is a major problem that we have I have no idea why it has gotten so astronomically expensive and out of control, why it has skyrocketed so much more than anything else when it comes to expenses in the last 30 years. It's insane. But that's not what we're talking about today either. But this was the first time that women just basically were going to college as a given. And then when we started to get married and we started to have children, we were also working because we were also the first generation that had to work. We had to have 2 incomes in order to support our lifestyle, which was, buying a house and maybe having a vacation, 2 cars. And it was at this point where it was becoming a necessity because housing had gone up so much and the price of cars have gone up so much. And what ended up happening is women were then working full time in addition to being the mother, the homemaker, the one that took care of everything at the home because, things basically stayed the same for men. Through all of these generations, the silent generation, the baby boomers, Gen X, men went to college or they didn't go to college. They got a job and they worked to support their family. Once Gen X came around and we came into our adulthood, it became clear that one income was not going to be enough. So women had to work alongside men. But men pretty much still just were expected to go to work and make money, come home and relax. Where women had to go out, make the money, then come home, make dinner, clean up dinner, put the kids to bed, get them their baths, help them with homework. And then whenever they had time, they had to do the laundry. They had to clean the house. I mean, obviously, this is a generalization. It's not the case in every marriage, but predominantly in a lot of marriages, this is how it went. And this is when women started to say, this is too much. I can't do all of this on my own. I can't work outside the home and inside the home and be responsible for all of the kids' activities and their doctor's appointments and their school activities and their sports. And then I still have to be there for, all of the major games and the pageants and the plays. And, again, men could get there if they could. If they could get away, they would get there for the pageant or the recital, what have you. And of course, each situation is completely individual. But for the most part, that was what was accepted in society. So women just said, you know what? we're overwhelmed. This is too much. You are expecting us to do the same thing that you do, plus all of the things that we used to do. Now we're doing both of them, and you're still getting to do the same thing. Meanwhile, we have double the work, double the stress, double the worry. Like, it was just too much. And when we started to voice this, we got a lot of pushback from men. Men would say things like, well, you want it to work outside the home. If you want to work outside the home, you have to do both. If you want things to be this way, then you need to take care of it. Now, I remember when I was growing up, my mom went to school to become like a nurse's aide. She predominantly was a phlebotomist. If you don't know whether that was somebody who just took blood. That was what she was trained for, was to take blood. And, now just the nurses do it. Now they don't really have a specific person to do that. In certain situations they do, but for the most part, it's just part of a nurse's job now. But while she was going to school for that, my father was 100% against it, 100% against the fact that she was going to school. And when she got her first job, he was 100% her working. And it really all comes down to the fact that once she was able to make her own money, he knew that he was not going to be able to control her in the same way that he had been for the majority of their marriage. And so men pushed back hard. They pushed back because they knew what the consequences could be. It could be that once women could make it on their own, could be financially successful on their own, that they wouldn't put up with stuff that they didn't like, that they could make their own life without somebody lording over them and telling them that they have to do things a certain way. And really just think about this, when men would say things like that. Well, you're the one that wanted to work outside the home, so you're going to have to take care of all of it. It just goes back to decades and decades of men just not really caring about what a woman wants, about helping to satisfy her emotional needs throughout her life. It's really sad. It's really sad when you think about it, because this was the predominant attitude in society in the 70s and the 80s. And, well, you want it to work, so, you're going to have to make everything work. You're still going to have to take care of the house and everything. Obviously, again, not the exact case in every individual situation, but predominantly that was what was being normalized in American society. So what I wanted to talk about today was this lack of respect for women's needs, women's desires, basically a lack of respect for girls and women in particular. And I think this goes back to when boys are growing up, and when there's a group of boys around and you're doing anything, you're taught to dislike girls. Don't be like a girl. If a boy gets hurt and he starts to cry, what? You're being like a girl. Girls cry. Boys don't cry. It comes from their friends, maybe their fathers, maybe even their mothers at a certain point in time. Be a big boy. Don't cry. But this term, like a girl, gets thrown around all the time when people are young, when they're children. You don't want to be like a girl. You throw like a girl. You run like a girl. You hit like a girl. This is a way to put a seed into their head very young that you don't want to be like a girl. So hence, you don't like girls. It's really not that far of a turn. If you don't want to do anything that's like a girl would do, what makes you think that you would like a girl at all? Now, as you grow, you become sexually attracted to girls, but do you really like them? Do you respect them? Because you've been taught all growing up, don't be like a girl. So if a girl throws like a girl, runs like a girl, acts like a girl, does that mean you respect them? More than likely not, because that was the seed that was implanted in you since you were very young. Don't be like a girl. I was watching a video recently of a woman who says, she is raising boys right now. And she says that you have this, overriding thing when you're raising boys is to raise them to be men. Raise them to be men. She said, but no one says what being a man entails. It only talks about what being a man doesn't entail. And that means not being feminine. That means don't be anything that a woman would be, because then you're going to be judged for that. So she says that if you are anything but happy, angry, or horny, you are called gay. So if you exhibit any emotion other than those three things, you're not going to be considered a man by your peers. It means you're going to be called names. It means you're going to be singled out. It means you're going to be pushed out from groups. We all know how important it is to fit in when we're in our teenage years. So this is why men are becoming more and more lonely, because they will not embrace any emotion other than those three things that I just mentioned. Because what does being a woman entail? Well, women are compassionate. Women are loving. Women are inclusive in community. Women are affectionate. Women seek out connection with other people. And when men don't get the opportunity to do this, they suffer for it. So the patriarchy is not just hurtful to women, it's hurtful to men as well. It's hurtful to society as a whole, to the entire community. Because I talk about on here constantly how we have to strip down the layers of what we've been taught we should be to discover who we truly are and be that person. That is the same exact thing for men. Men are taught to have no emotions other than anger. Well, that's just not possible as a human. And if you aren't free to express the emotions that you're having, then you're hiding your true self and you're not being true to yourself, and you will never truly feel happy and fulfilled. So this is not good for men either. And I wanted to point out a couple of things about how men have a really severe lack of respect for women. By some of the comments that I've gotten on some of the videos that I have posted recently, I got a lot of comments from men about a certain video that I had posted this week on one of my social media groups. And in the video, I was talking about how men's greatest fear is to be humiliated, while women's greatest fear is to be assaulted or killed by a man. And I was talking about the disparity of the two fears. And here are some of the comments, just a couple of the comments that I got on that video. A man's greatest fear is waking up and seeing you lying next to him and then finding out he has married you in a drunken stupor the night before. That's what a man's greatest fear is. Let me see. There's so many. But let me just scroll through this. Imagine if you had to pass an intelligent test in order to use a microphone and record yourself. What a much better place we would have. Let's see what else. Women-splaining. She knows what a man's fear is. She only knows what her greatest fear is. Okay, that one wasn't terrible. But there's been some very, very rude comments. This is literally the dumbest stuff I've heard someone say all year. Literally, lady, you have no clue what you are talking about. Again, no respect at all. And listen, what patriarchy? Just keep trying to divide us, woman against men, man against woman. When did it become a competition? God made men and then made women as a helpmate, not a competitor. This is some of the comments I'm getting from that clip. There's one in particular. Just stop with your BS, lady. American women have no idea how to be a traditional wife anymore. That's why men go overseas to get traditional wives. American women are for recreation use only. There's a lot of respect in that comment right there. Okay. At least put on the rest of your clown makeup before you do your video so everyone knows what a clown you are. So those were just a couple of the comments, and I have a ton of them. If you would like to actually go scroll through them, it's that Instagram at @the_Hopefulist if you would like to scroll through the rest of the comments. But these are some of the things that were said to me just on one video that somehow got a lot of attention. And I don't comment back to any of these comments. I don't reply. I don't say anything because, it's actually just helping my video get more views. When you make comments, it's going to push the algorithm to show it to more people. So thank you. Thank you for the very rude comments that show over and over again how little men respect women. And it wasn't just one or two people. It was a barrage of people telling us how they really feel about women. So this, in essence, is why men are struggling so much. Because they have this lack of respect and really a lack of liking women. They really don't like women. They're just sexually attracted to them because they've been told since they were young, since they were little boys, to not be like girls. Don't be like a girl, making it the most disgusting thing in the world. You don't want to be like a girl. So it makes sense that they still truly don't like girls when they get older and start dating. It makes sense that they have no respect for girls because they had no respect for girls when they were young. And there's not a switch that gets flipped when they get older and want to start dating and decide to settle down and marry. They don't all of a sudden go, oh, well, that was wrong. No, this is deeply ingrained. But this is, in essence, why men are going through a so-called loneliness crisis, is because they refuse to see women as an equal. They refuse to see women as a partner. They refuse to consider what a woman might want out of her life. Men have been trained and conditioned to center themselves, and they have. But now it's time to include a life partner into those daily needs, desires, and the way that you go about your entire day. It's not just one-sided anymore. It's not women coming together with men to help them realize their dream, and we're just going to be along for the ride. No, women want to pursue their own dreams now. And if you're not on board with that, then a lot of women are just going to stay single. And we have trained men. The patriarchy has trained men to do the absolute bare minimum. Society has always taught men, you need to get a good job, provide for your family, and then you're good. that's no longer the case. Because when you can't really provide for your family anymore, unless you're, making a whole hell of a lot of money, now women have to contribute to the household finances. And when that happens, they want to say, don't misunderstand me. They should have always had a say. But now they're going to demand that they have a say. And instead of embracing this, instead of thinking, what can I do to make the life of my partner better? Men are just pushing back and trying to take us backwards to the time when we needed to rely on them for our soul survival so that they can continue to do the bare minimum and center themselves in every situation. That's the way I see it. You can disagree. That's completely fine. But this is why men are lonely. Because they refuse to step up and do the work. They refuse to evolve. They don't want to get into why they are not able to freely be themselves, to express the emotions that they have. If they would do this, not only would they be better partners, they'd be better humans. They'd be better people for themselves. They'd be happier and more fulfilled people on their own. But it does take work. It takes work. And it's not always fun. This is what is needed, though. Women have been going through this for decades and decades and decades. We've been doing the work to tear down all of these beliefs that we were taught that aren't true. And the same goes for men. You are allowed to have an emotion other than anger. You are allowed. And as a collective, you need to unite on that. So how do you do that? How do you start to change the conversation? How do you start to let other men know that you are no longer going to just follow along? That you want to help women be full, individualized people? Well, you have to educate other men. This is how we change the conversation. You men have to educate other men. You have to tell your friends to stop when they're in the locker room degrading women. When men are in the locker room telling these locker room stories, objectifying women and acting like they're only around to satisfy your sexual needs, you need to step up and say, yo, bro, I don't talk about my wife like that. I don't want you talking about my sister like that. Because this is why we need men to do it. Because men are not going to listen to women. They're just not. After the George Floyd incident happened in 2020, I read a lot of stories. One of the stories that I read was from a white woman who married a black man. And she said when her husband got home from work one night, he went to take her car to fill it up with gas so she would have it. She would have a full gas tank. And when he pulled into the gas station, he was swarmed by police cars. And apparently there had been a robbery in the area. And he was told that he fit the description of the person that was suspected of committing the robbery, which probably meant that he was black. So they, have guns drawn, yelling at him to get out of the car. They have him on the ground. And finally, a white man comes out. And this is the point of the whole story. A white man comes out from inside the gas station, mini mart or whatever it was, and said, listen, I saw he came from this direction, and I know that the robbery was in that direction. You've got the wrong guy. And you know what happened? They let him go. Do you think they would have let him go if it was a black man that came out of the gas station and said, yo, I saw him come from that direction? You've got the wrong guy. Do you think? I don't think they would have. So just like it took a white man to speak up, to right that situation, we need you men to speak up for us, to right this situation. So when you hear your friends talking about women in a disparaging way, talking about women as they are objects, here for your pure pleasure to do with as you wish, you need to be the one to step up and to say, oh no, bro, that's not how we talk about women here. Doesn't make you a man to treat women that way. It makes you less of a man to treat women that way. If you see your friend in a bar berating a woman because she said, I'm not interested, can you just leave me alone? And then they start harassing this woman because their ego was hurt, because they've been rejected and now feel embarrassed. So they need to lash out at this woman. Step in and say, hey, she said she's not interested. Let's go. Don't stand by and watch them and make excuses. And I've seen this. I'm sorry, he's just really drunk right now or whatever. Like, you're explaining it to the woman that's being harassed, but you're not saying anything to the one who's doing the harassing. Can you see how backward that is? So you guys need to step up for us women. If you want to be in true relationships, if you want to have a meaningful connection with women, you have to consider our needs. You have to consider our desires. You have to help. And you have to stop the spread of this disrespect and this dislike of women as a whole. It's really that simple. And I know it's not simple. It's simple. It's just difficult to actually put into practice. But this is when we really need you to be the man, to step in and to right these wrongs. So this is how you help to change the conversation, to make it better for everyone, not just women, but men as well, so that you can embrace your true self, so you can actually express the emotions that you feel in the given moment. You don't have to wait until you get home to actually express an emotion of despair or depression or of unhappiness. It'll be okay to do it in real time. So, to my fellow women, hopefully now you can realize that every time you were made to feel wrong, it was ultimately a them problem. You know, you've probably grown up in a lot of different relationships with men where you were too needy, you were too demanding, you were too this, you were too that. And now you can step back and you can think about those times and how they made you feel like crap. How they made you feel like you were wrong. You were too demanding. You were too needy. You can step back now and say, was I? Was I really? You can reanalyze those situations and realize that it really wasn't your fault. That it was the conditioning that not only men had, but women had as well. So you can let yourself off the hook. Because it wasn't you that was wrong. It was the system that was wrong. It's time to realize you haven't done anything wrong. It's time to step into your true self, knowing that no matter how you feel, that is never wrong. It is never wrong to feel how you feel. So I want you to fully embrace your real, true self, because that is where the freedom lies, ladies. Once you become your true self, you trust yourself. Once you trust yourself, you know that you will always be okay, no matter what happens. if your family leaves, if your husband leaves, if your friends leave. Once you trust yourself, you will love yourself enough to not stand for less than you deserve. And that's what I truly want for you. To accept no less than you deserve. And what you deserve is everything you have always wanted. So stop making other people make you feel like you've been wrong. Because expressing what you want, need, and feel is never wrong. If you like today's episode, I urge you to share it with some of your friends, or you can share a social media post. If you have not given a rating to the podcast, could you please do that? That will really help other people find the podcast. Go on to the App Store, and in the podcast, you can rate me right on that page. Or if you listen in Spotify, the same thing. Go to the home page of the podcast and leave me a rating. And share this with your friends. I would so appreciate it. So I hope that you learned something today. I hope that you feel a little bit better about yourself than you did at the beginning. And I hope that you will embrace yourself fully and become the person you have always been meant to be. Now go on out there this week and be badass. I'm here cheering you on. Thank you for joining me in this conversation. Together, we are better. Please visit my website at hopefulist.com and remember to hit that subscribe or follow button.